I was the last one to begin. I am the blood of a million slaves who bled and died. I am the moan of a suffering people. I am the blues. I am quite sure that 90% of the audience believes that the blues is a musical genre that took life and picked up momentum in the 20th century. Actually, the blues is a cry, an expression, a sentiment that has been making its way to this stage for more than 5 centuries. It began on the west coast of Africa, conceived in the holds of slave ships where my people lay stacked on top of each other, lying in their own waste, beaten, starved, and finally birthed on the auction blocks of coastal towns where slave ships docked. In this bag that you see on the stage, I have brought with me the actual tools and instruments that form the blues. Many of you believe that blues came from instruments like the harmonica. No. Many of you believe that it is in the guitar. No. Some think it's in the drum, the bass, horns. No. The instruments of the blues is the human voice used to cry out from an injured and wounded soul. The first jam session or rehearsal for the blues actually took place right here. Before you is the first onion skin, if you will, for the rhythm of the blues. As musicians chart their notes on onion skin, this is a poster from a slave auction in which my people were sold to be no more of use than an animal. This is the onion skin for which the first notes, bars, and phrases of the blues were written. Sometimes the actual melody that you hear in the blues are part of the rhythm comes from the shaking and the rattling of these chains. It is the shuffle, the rhythm that you hear in the slow, agonizing blues that you believe was birthed in the juke joints, clubs, and concert halls of the American South. No. If you will, I'm going to ask you to come and go with me as I take you on a journey to where the blues was breathed life, how it allowed my people to communicate with each other, and the person that would have killed them, mauled them, did not know what they were saying. See, the blues did not begin as a house-rocking backbeat and melody to get you on your feet. It began as a method of communication so that my people maintained hope. If you are indeed a blues fan, many of you know what these are. All across the South in blues museums and in blues folklore, you will see these blue bottles on bottle trees. How many of you have seen them? These bottles are put on those bottle trees because it was believed by the African that any evil spirit would be caught inside of the bottle and kept away from them and their family. If you will notice that the most prominent color of the bottles are blue. It is believed, and I do not want you to miss this, because this will be an aha moment for you blues enthusiasts, blues fans, and blues scholars. The bottles were blue because it is believed that anything in African folklore and the African religion of Vodun, which is the native religion of my people, anything of the color blue had the power to drive away bad spirits. How ironic that this musical genre, in all of its power to drive away such bad spirits, is known as the blues. Thus the reason the blue bottles to take those spirits away. Would you please accept this from me and my ancestors? Catch your bad spirits in the bottle, for this is how the blues began. Catch your bad spirits in a bottle, for this is how the blues began. As a panacea, a cure-all, because you must realize that had you worked in the fields all day, come closer, I won't bite. Had you worked in the fields all day as a strong, sinewy man, under the eyes of a taskmaster, with the threat that if you did not fill that 9-foot cotton sack with 100 pounds of cotton, that you would be flogged. Once you had accomplished that mission, you thought that you were going to go home to your wife and enjoy her, only to hear a knock at the door of your cabin in the slave quarters and your wife be summoned away. And when she returns, she comes back with the stench of another man's lust upon her flesh, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. That is the blues. I want you to imagine getting up early in the morning to go and toil for a family, to make sure that their children are fed, clothed, clean, that the laundry is done, that their little ones are taught well. And about this time of the day, right before the setting of the sun, on account of the mercy and kindness of your master, you are allowed to go home to your cabin. I want you to imagine that you've hung up your apron and you have now left the kitchen of the big house. And right as your foot touches the bottom step, you look off into the clearing to see your son, your daughter, your husband loaded on the back of a wagon to be sold away from you, your family ripped from your bosom, your breast, your womb, by the very man whose family you have fed all day. That is the blues. I want you to understand that the rhythm of the blues is the rhythm that they use to break the monotony of the workday. And that rhythm was actually formed by this instrument. It is the crack of this whip and the fear thereof that kept them working to a rhythm that would sustain them throughout the day. And as their backs were being broken, they refused to allow their spirits to be broken. And for that reason, to make sure that we could communicate with each other and communicate to our God, we began to speak to each other in the only language that we were allowed, the cry of the human spirit. And in the cry of that human spirit, I could not come to you and tell you that your family was going to be sold. I couldn't walk up to you and say, hey, Joe, they're going to sell that boy of yours in the morning. Master go and sell him further down into Mississippi, down by Vicksburg. I heard him over talking about it in his study. I couldn't do that to you. I couldn't communicate that to you. So in one of America's most popular folk songs that was birthed in the blues, I would have to tell you this. There's a man going around taking names. There's a man going around taking names. Well, he took my brother's name and he left my heart in pain. There's a man going around taking names. There's a man going around taking names. There's a man going around taking names. And he took my brother's name and he left my heart in pain. There's a man going around taking names. And that is how I communicated to you. Before payola came and made the blues hits, before we danced in the juke joints, I had to be able to warn you that if you did not want to be sold, that you'd better run. And I had to let you know that if I was going, I wanted you to come too. So while you were over on that row trying to fill your sack, and I was here on this row trying to fill my sack, I would have to let you know that maybe Harriet Tubman, Moses as she was known, had returned to take us with her. But I couldn't walk up to you and go, hey man, we're leaving about 5 o'clock in the morning. You need to get you some trail mix and a bag packed. Not gonna happen. But what I could do was I could say, one morning soon, one morning soon, Lord, it was one morning soon, I heard the angels singing, they were all around my bed, they were around my bed, Lord, they were all around my bed, and I heard the angels singing, coming to carry you home, coming to carry you coming to carry you home. Yes, I heard the angels singing, coming to carry me home, coming to carry me home, my Lord, coming to carry me home. I heard the angels singing. Now, when we had left, and the way we wanted to communicate to some of the people who were actually on our side, because I wanted to be known clearly in this room that from the beginning of times of slavery and anything else that divides us as a people in this country, we were not all always at odds with each other. That there were people in my ancestors and yours who sought to do the right thing. And somewhere in my quest, when you hear in blues and even gospel songs them speaking about rivers, the Jordan River is actually Ohio River. Because once we crossed the Ohio River, we were in the land where we could be free. But it was there at the Ohio River that the patty rollers, or those who had been destined or deputized by law enforcement, they knew to camp there at the Ohio River so that we did not cross into freedom. It was there that if you had this poster with my picture or the pictures of my ancestors, that you could collect the bounty that was set on my head. So, if you were an abolitionist and you had a safe house, to let you know that I was coming near, I couldn't pick up my cell phone and text you, we're 5 miles out. Keep the light on, we'll be there in just a moment. LOL, KMSL, none of that. I would have to wait, feeling the moss on the trees, because the moss grew on the north side of the tree, letting me know that I was northbound. I would have to, somewhere in the clearing, hope that you hear me when I would sing. Let your light shine, shine, shine. Let your light shine, shine, shine. There may be someone down in the valley trying to get home. Maybe your mother, maybe mine. You got to let your little light shine. There may be someone down in the valley trying to get home. And once I made it to your house, to make sure that I didn't have any problems because I had gotten this far, the slaves would raise their voices and sing, I don't want no trouble at the river. I don't want no trouble at the river. I don't want no trouble at the river when I get ready to cross. In each of those melodies, you will hear the very scale from which the blues is derived. The African scale has only 5 notes, known as a pentatonic scale. Every blues musician in this house, when you play the blues, you play 1, 4, 5, 4, 1. You go no higher than the 5. As a matter of fact, it was actually a slave trader who took liberty and made great use of those 5 notes and wrote one of the greatest anthems of the Christian church. Amazing grace. How many notes? How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Interesting that in his conversion for all of his sins as a slave trader, that he penned the very hymn that became most beloved in the African American church as well. I want you to understand that that is where it all got started, in the fields. I want you to understand that when you hear Lil Walter playing My Babe, what he is actually doing is borrowing the notes from a secret coded message. When you hear him saying, my babe, don't, my babe, no, that's not what he's saying. He's taking those notes from where I would have told you what time I'm leaving and how we're leaving. This train is a clean train, this train. This train is a clean train, this train. This train is a clean train. Everybody riding with Jesus' name. This train. Oh, I'm talking about this train. Now, when you hear Jesus, please don't think I'm some sacrilegious person doomed for hell. Because when you hear us say Jesus in those songs, and even when you hear the old blues shouters scream about Jesus, they're not talking about the blue-eyed white boy on the back of the church fan. Did you know that the very first vessel that brought Africans to the shores of America, the name of that seafaring vessel was Jesus? So now, when you go to a lot of the programs that will come next month, and you hear them sing, steal away, steal away, steal away to Jesus, steal away, steal away home. I ain't got long to stay here. They ain't talking about, you know, Jesus and them 12 dudes that he hung out with. They were talking about stealing back to the very ship that brought them over here in hopes that they could get home. I want you to know that the blues began as a way to keep our sanity and to keep our spirits from being broken. And I find it very interesting that those illiterate souls who were treated as less than human